We are not believers in this idea that you must have conflicts or arguments, and they're just a part of relationships.
When I hear it, I just have to and I hear it a lot more now than ever that couples who say they never argue are lying or they're really repressed. And I just have to laugh. I'm like, okay, 20 years, we're seriously repressed, and we can actually have a conversation about just about anything that will make other couples really nervous to have.
And we spend so much time together, Nick. I mean, sometimes we're together 24/7, right? Because we're so involved in what we're doing together. You would think that if there was ever an opportunity for arguments or disagreements, it's when you spend so much time together.
All right, what's up, everybody? Welcome back to the Best You podcast. Today, I'm super excited to be joined by the one and only Molly Apple and the one and only Joe Dunn. Molly and Joe, just want to start off by saying thanks so much for spending the time with me today, y'all.
Super happy to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, of course. So I'm really excited. Anytime I've interviewed a couple a few different times, but never necessarily specifically about relationships. So I'm really excited to dive into relationships, y'all's relationships in generals, and y'all's philosophy and stuff. But I want to start off by a little bit how you guys met. I know you guys met kind of off of Craigslist, which is awesome. I guess how probably a little bit more of the online dating scene from years ago. Tell me a little bit about the first dating experience from y'all's perspective. Was it one of these like the first date was amazing and we knew this person was someone we saw a future with, or was it like, I'm not really sure, it was a little bit awkward? Tell me a little bit about kind of the first date experience for y'all.
It was pretty amazing, actually.
Yeah.
It was actually after about 3 weeks or so of madly writing back and forth to each other.
No pictures.
Yeah.
Wow.
Just text.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, who does that?
Not very many people.
We were actually really excited to not share pictures. We talked about it a lot and decided not to do it. And I was just blown away when I saw him in person.
So tell me a little bit about these letters then. What do you think y'all talked about in the letters that made it such a powerful thing to communicate that way first, and transitioning into the first meeting being so powerful as well?
I think the main thing that we talked about from the very beginning was relationships. And I was really intrigued because, I don't know, maybe a half a dozen years before I'd gone to a really intensive relationship course. And a lot of the ideas that I was hearing from Molly were basically very similar to what I'd heard, half a dozen years before. And so it really piqued my interest. And that's, I think, what kept this dialogue going. At least from my side,
yeah,
for sure.
I think it really interested you, Joe, because at the time you were taking that course, you were in a relationship that was really spiraling downward, and you couldn't put those ideas into practice at that
Right.
time.
I think it was too far gone for that. So, to have this opportunity to basically, try these ideas fresh was amazing.
So, Molly, I'm interested, when you were discussing relationships via letter, what were you communicating? Were you asking what he thought would be a successful relationship? Were you saying what you thought would be a successful relationship? Were you discussing best practices? What exactly were you discussing?
I think best practices is the way to characterize it, because it was things like not coming into the relationship with expectations about who this person is, about what they're going to do for you, and giving them as much space as possible to be themselves and having that reciprocated.
Yeah.
And I was very interested in an experiment of somebody who was ready to try a relationship based on principles like that. Principles like accepting who this person is, where they came from, their belief systems, all
their education.
The things that make them into who they are, and being very self-aware that you're not imposing something on them or wanting them to be different than who they are.
Mm-hmm. So I'm interested, if you don't want the person to be different than they are. Obviously, everybody's going to be a little bit different, and you don't want to go in with expectations. What are some of the most important things that you kind of need to have alignment on when it comes to relationships? Obviously, it's fine to have plenty of things that are different, but what are some of the most important things to have alignment on?
And this is a great question, because when people are coaching people for dating, they'll tell them to make a list of what they want and what they don't want. And I think oftentimes those lists turn into list of limitations, because there are certain things that everybody should be looking for. Somebody who's got integrity, somebody who is honest and kind, and all of those things that everybody really ought to have in a relationship as a baseline. And above that, I don't think there's a lot that's necessary beyond that. Besides having, unless your belief systems, if somebody's extremely religious and somebody isn't, that could be an issue. But other than that, you don't need to have somebody speak a specific language or have earned a certain number of degrees. Those things really aren't what makes a relationship great.
Yeah. In fact, going back to the list that people make for a moment, if Molly had put on her list that she wants somebody with a college degree, we never would have met, because I don't have one. And so, it just made me realize how limiting those lists can be, right? You might have the perfect person, but he didn't check one, or she didn't check one box, and you'll never know.
And I would have never met him if we'd had to share pictures first.
That's true. That's true, because I had this idea in my head, as crazy as it seems to me now, 20 years later, that I was not attracted to redheads. So I was, that was an interesting thing, that when we finally did meet after 3 weeks, I was confronted with this picture, my picture of what I thought was attractive and not attractive. And it didn't take long for me to shift, but it was a great experience to the way we met and how it all rolled out. Because if I'd been looking on a dating site and just scrolling pictures, I would have scrolled right by.
Yeah, no doubt. I'm interested to go a little bit further into the no pictures thing, because I think that's awesome. I've had similar thoughts about doing that before dating, going on dates as well. Talk to me a little bit about how much you feel like it's important when it comes to like sexual attraction and visual attraction early on, like how important having at least like some of that is, versus it's not really important at all. You can just fall in love with the person and then you can become attracted to them physically. I guess, like, give me a little bit of y'all's opinion or thoughts or experiences with regards to the importance of the physical attraction early on.
I think this is a little bit why I am actually addicted to Love is Blind. I'm going to admit that right here. The only show I've ever been
the woman who doesn't watch TV is
because that's exactly what they're doing. Can you develop a relationship without sight unseen? And I think there has to be some degree of physical attraction. However, I'm also a person who's going blind. And so I think a lot about, well, what about if you were blind? You'd still have some people that you were physically attracted to and some you weren't. There's pheromones and there's other things that are indicators of that make people feel sexual attraction to somebody. So I think that, yes, you can develop it to a certain degree, but there's some, unknown ingredients that you at the bottom line, you're either going to be able to develop that attraction or you're not going to be able to. So eventually meeting in person, seeing if that any degree of chemistry is there is important.
Awesome. Yeah, no, I think that's great. I've actually never watched Love is Blind myself, so maybe I need to go watch it and get an idea of what their conversations are. I have a girlfriend right now, and she watches Love is Blind as well, so I might have to sit down and watch it with her a little bit. I know that in this, I was going through a little bit of the Soulmate Experience, and y'all's talk about how it's important to kind of see your significant other, the person you're in a relationship with as a guest in your life. I want you to run with that idea a little bit and talk to us a little bit about what you mean by that.
Well, basically, when you have a guest that shows up in your life, you treat them typically really well, right? And I think the tendency in a relationship is that, that person shows up as a guest in your life for a while, and then they become, this same person you're in relationship with, and things sort of tend to ease up a little bit in terms of that, how you view your partner. So to continually hold them as a guest in your life, because let's face it, I mean, they are a guest in your life, right? Anybody at any time could decide they're going to bail out and go. And I think the more we treat our partner as a guest in our life, the less that's likely to happen.
And that, again, entails not putting on them a lot of expectations about who they are, how they show up. You wouldn't do that to somebody that was a really good friend of yours that you don't get to see very often. It's that concept of holding the space for them to be someone different than you expect them to be. That makes the room for them to grow.
As soon as we have a list of expectations about what our partner should be, it really kind of restricts their potential.
No, I think that's great. I think what you said, Molly, with regards to almost expect them to be somebody different, leaves the room for them to be whoever they are, be whoever they want to be. And one of the things that I saw y'all talk about as well is the importance about not getting completely enveloped in your identity as a couple and making sure that you have your own identity as well. And so I want to hear what you guys do to ensure that you still are kind of like developing yourself and developing your own identity, but also developing as a couple. So talk to me about some of the different things that y'all do to make sure you're developing individually and together.
It's really important that people be allowed to have whatever friendships nourish them. And that's one place where somebody might try to control their partner's friendships. They might try to control their partner's extracurricular activities. And I'm not talking about affairs. I'm just talking about if I'm somebody that likes to go out with my friends to a bar because I enjoy the camaraderie and the music and all that, I don't want to be with a partner who is so jealous over something like that we can't talk about it and help them learn to be more comfortable with it. So I particularly see this. I particularly see that happening where women are uncomfortable if their guy wants to go out with their guy friends. That's something inherently makes them nervous about that situation. And to me, that's an opportunity for a conversation and understanding and finding new ways to be comfortable with us, understanding where he's coming from. Why does he enjoy doing that? Why does that give him something?
Yeah. And a lot of times in relationships, I think our partners expect us to basically end relationships that they feel is a threat. But in our relationship, Molly has male friends, I have female friends, and we celebrate those relationships, as opposed to, want our partner to shut them down.
Just because we're fearful.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Do you think that insecurity around if he has a female friend and you felt insecure about that, do you feel like that insecurity is mainly from you, mainly from a lack of trust of him, or a combination? What do you see most frequently with regards to where that maybe insecurity comes from?
So often that insecurity comes from a couple of things. One is cultural conditioning, right? We're actually trained to be nervous about that. And almost any television show, movie you watch, song lyrics, they give this message that you need to be on guard and you need to be watchful. And number two, it can come from past experiences. So if I'm with someone who was untrustworthy and actually behaved in untrustworthy ways, I might develop this sort of PTSD response to certain situations. Those are the kinds of things that we advocate, and we talk a lot in our books about how to open up conversations about this before you ever have to be in those situations.
Right.
We want couples to be having those conversations from the start. Let's share. Let's develop this habit of sharing these places that are kind of fearful to talk about.
And they can be uncomfortable to talk about too, especially if you've sort of been trained that, oh no, we don't talk about it. We just do our thing. And so Yeah, I would agree. It
Those conversations generate intimacy.
Mm,
When we can talk about the things that we're afraid of, that make us jealous, that happened in other relationships, that we're fearful about, when we can create a safe space to be able to talk about those things and be able to not only just talk about them, but like, oh, it makes me nervous when we go to parties because I'm afraid you're going to see other attractive women and then you're not going to really want to be with me. If we can have conversations about that, he can be as reassuring as he likes, but I still might have that reaction when we go to a party. So if we can have this agreement that we go into the party together, and I'm aware that he's willing to listen to me if I'm saying, oh, it's happening now. Like I see that woman over there and it makes me nervous. I'm telling myself, I want to reveal what is the dialogue I'm giving myself that's making me feel nervous. Mm-hmm. And when we can bring that out in the open, it's just like anything else. Shame, fears, when we can bring it out in the open with someone, that takes the sting off it right away.
Absolutely. I mean, we feel better. It creates a more intimate environment. And we can also feel comfortable about talking about other things that might come up and that will come up right in the future.
Yeah. I think that was a great insight when you said that these difficult conversations create more intimacy, because I think oftentimes we fear the difficult conversation because we think there might be negative ramification from the difficult conversation, but actually it can be a positive. Most often it seems like it might be a positive thing and create even more intimacy for you guys. So I feel like instead of viewing the difficult conversation as scary, try to view it as an opportunity that you can step into and grow through.
Right.
Exactly
Especially
right.
if we have these sort of meta conversations before that time even comes, where we talk about with a new person, I'm going to want to talk about when things come up, I want to be able to discuss them. Let's talk about what that might be like. Like, it's not easy to do, right? You're nervous to bring it up. You don't know how the person's going to react. But if we've had conversations before that time and sort of practiced it and know that we're both going to be on one end or the other at some point. It's not always going to be me who's feeling insecure or fearful. You've got your insecurities around other things. And at some point we'll be talking about that. Then we've sort of set the stage for being able to have that conversation when the time warrants it.
And as difficult as these conversations are, they're so much easier to have ahead of a relationship, of really jumping into it. Because, what often happens is, right, I'm talking to a woman over here, and maybe Molly is jealous and upset, and maybe she says something to me because, we haven't had the conversations, and I take it the wrong way, and I get defensive, or irritated by it.
I have to say that's not ever happened in this relationship.
No, I'm just saying this is what oftentimes we
hypothetical
relationships, yeah.
Just trying to take that on just felt really icky.
That's amazing. So I love this. I think that having that meta conversation before something like that even presented itself is really big. And so I'm going to kind of run with that idea of importance of different kind of meta conversations to have. So I'm 28, and I'm of the age where a lot of people right now who are around my age are getting married. And anytime somebody gets engaged, the thought is like, oh my gosh, that happened so quick, or man, that took forever. And we think about it just from like a time perspective rather than necessarily like how well you got to know that person in that time and the conversations that you had during that time. Because I don't think there's necessarily you have to date somebody for X number of months or years before you should get engaged or anything like that. I think a lot has to do with the level of conversation and the level of maturity of the individual, all to kind of lead up to the question of what kind of conversations do you think are massively important to ensure that you have with a significant other before you're making the lifelong commitment with them?
Mm-hmm. I love what you've just said there, that people who have these kind of deep conversations probably are readier than people who haven't. So I really appreciate that. I want people to talk about places they're insecure. I want them to be able to talk about places they feel inhibited. I want them to talk about places they feel shame. These are big conversations, and they have to establish beforehand a safe space where I know I'm not going to be judged. I know you're here to love me no matter what. We've had these conversations where we say we both have insecurities. We both have inhibitions. We both feel shame around some things. We both can feel envious or jealous at times. And those are really the biggest ones. And if we can talk about, wow, where has that been in my past? A lot of people are really afraid to tell someone they've ever felt jealous, even if they feel it a lot.
Right.
Because there's such a stigma around it for good reason. Not because it's a bad thing to experience, but because of what we might do when we're in a jealous state, when we don't have other tools.
That's really good. For my experience, so many people talk about in a relationship around how arguing and conflict is just part of it. People always say, like, there's just going to be arguments. They're going to have conflicts. You have to find a way to work through them. My experience is I've had amazing parents, and I don't know if I've really ever seen them actually have a real fight or an argument. Of course, they maybe have opinion disagreements about certain things, but it never escalates to a fight or an argument or a major conflict or anything like that. So that has never really been my experience. And then with my experience with my girlfriend, we've been dating for about a year now, and we've never really had an argument. And when other people are telling me that it's just part of it, I'm like, is something wrong with me because I'm not having an argument? So I want to hear kind of y'all's input with regards to the prevalence of arguing and conflict, and maybe strategies around mitigating those things.
Mm-hmm. We are not believers in this idea that you must have conflicts or arguments, and they're just a part of relationships.
When I hear it, I just have to and I hear it a lot more now than ever, that couples who say they never argue are lying, or they're really repressed. And I just have to laugh. I'm like, okay, 20 years, we're seriously repressed when we can actually have a conversation about just about anything that will make other couples really nervous to have.
And we spend so much time together, Nick. I mean, sometimes we're together 24/7, right? Because we're so involved in what we're doing together. You would think that if there was ever an opportunity for arguments or disagreements, it's when you spend so much time together.
So I do think it's something that you want to start from the very beginning. There's a lot of things I believe couples should. In fact, our newest book, Wild Monogamy, the very first chapter has something we call the intimacy inquiry. And it's dozens and dozens of really deep questions that might take a lifetime to really dive into, because they're meant to generate intimacy by having people look at things and discuss things that they're probably not ever discussed in their relationship before. But it creates this foundation for being able to talk about the hard things. And you've practiced now not just reacting in the moment when your partner brings up something that, wow, I really that doesn't sit well with me, but I'm going to use these tools we've now developed, which is I'm going to do my best to understand where he's coming from, to recognize that if I had his history and his education and his experiences and his belief system, I would believe exactly what he believes right now. Mm. And to be able to have that perspective and hold it as, I'm going to honor whatever your belief is, even if I don't agree with it, then we don't have to argue. Yeah. We can have a much more productive conversation about, okay, you've got that, and I hold this belief over here pretty tightly. How can we creatively make something work for both of us?
We'll be back to the interview in just a second, but first I wanted to share some words from a participant of the 10-week transformation. At Best You, we started running the 10WT back in January of 2020 and have since had 313 people and counting go through it. They've seen their bodies get stronger than ever before, they've seen the stubborn fat finally come off, and they've seen their habits dramatically improve. And honestly, more than anything, they've seen their self-confidence skyrocket. If you want to learn more about the 10-week transformation, then you can go to nickcarrier.com/10WT. That's nickcarrier.com/10WT. We'll get back to the show in just a second, but first, here's what they had to say.
I have completed Nick's transformation program twice, and I'm gearing up to start my third. I have seen more and more progress every time I complete the program, and not all of it is just physical. I would say the two best parts of the program for me have been, first, Nick has taught me how to really prepare my week to overcome the type of obstacles that everybody is up against when it comes to trying to maintain our health journeys. And then the second being that during really chaotic seasons of life, it's helped me to prioritize my health. The workouts are really fun. We do new stuff every time you walk into the gym, and I've been involved in group fitness classes my entire life, and the amount of energy that Nick brings is completely unparalleled. It's so much fun. I love it. So if you're thinking about doing it, you should. You'll be glad you did.
So do you feel like, kind of at high level, when it comes to relationships where their arguments or conflict happens very seldom or not at all, is it really about the few things of knowing the other person so well through different levels of conversation, you having a lot of skills and tools in your tool belt on how to manage different situations?
I think that would result in that. I mean, obviously there are couples that they're just so mellow and they just don't hold really strong beliefs, or their beliefs completely line up that they wouldn't have a lot of conflict. So there's that category. But for people who aren't completely aligned, I think just what you say, these are skills that we want. If we don't come into the relationship with, which most of us don't because we didn't have a relationship education growing up,
right?
We want to consciously develop them together.
So that's why it's so important to try to do a lot of this at the start of a relationship, right? And not wait until you get down the road and then
all the stuff that's built up.
Right. Plus you come up with these ideas, you surprise the heck out of your partner because just now 3 years into the relationship, you've pulled up some idea that totally, disagrees with what your partner thinks. And it's just so much easier to try to work that stuff out at the beginning. Mm. Have those conversations and get comfortable with who your partner is and who you are in relation to your partner.
And get comfortable with they might not always be the person that you wish they were.
Yeah.
That they need to do things their own way and that they need to grow at their own pace. Even though we really, really believe that once you have that environment established, you can be the most help for your partner in their own personal growth. When you're able to say, hey, whatever it is that you want to develop in yourself, I'm here to help you with that.
Yeah.
And I don't have an agenda for you, and I'm not going to I don't have any expectation that you evolve at a certain pace, but I'm here to help you when I can.
And what better than your partner who you spend so much time with to help you be a better person? I mean, they know you intimately. And they know where your weaknesses are. They know where your strengths are. Oftentimes they see your strengths better than you do.
That's true.
Yeah, no doubt. So you guys have talked about how sometimes you as a partner, you're best positioned to be that other person's catalyst for their own personal development, their own personal growth. And I had a brief little backstory. I had the blessing and opportunity to be able to officiate my cousin's wedding a number of months ago. And before the officiating of that wedding, I, for whatever reason, started to think about how I wanted to intertwine what my definition of love actually is. And then I didn't have a definition for love, so I started to explore what I thought that was. And kind of what I came up with, simply based off of mainly looking at my parents' relationship and other relationships that I admire and respect, is I said they have fun. People who really love each other have fun together. They are willing to sacrifice for each other, and they're better together. And I think that, better together is a little bit what you guys just addressed with regards to being that other person's best catalyst for personal growth and development. Talk to me a little bit about maybe how you guys think about love and what are some of the key ingredients that you need for lasting love.
Well, I think you pretty much nailed it, Nick, with your three. But
having fun is important.
Yes. You must have fun.
Yeah. And I think
we think so.
I think one of the things that comes naturally to us, but it can also be something that you intentionally cultivate is a gratitude for just the opportunity to get to spend time with this person. And the knowledge, like I remind myself every day, and people think this is a little macabre sometimes, but I remind myself every day that this guy could die tomorrow. And that helps me cherish everything we get to do together, even the challenging things.
Yeah. I'm a competitive swimmer, so I'm probably not going to die tomorrow, but just
no, I think obviously, yes. But I think that's a great perspective to always have, because I think sometimes if we think about our own mortality, that gives us a sense of urgency and a sense of gratitude for every single day that we get to experience. Before I kind of get down to the last couple questions, I want to go back actually to more of the inception of y'all's relationship, because Molly, I know that you had, I think if I remember correctly, that you had a daughter with someone previously, and then Joe comes into your life. So give me a little bit of the dynamic of what that was like when Joe came into your life with you already having a daughter. I know there was a quote in the book about how you had a therapist saying like she's going to be really screwed up because of this whole relationship dynamic, which I thought was hilarious. Obviously not the case. So tell me a little bit about why do you think it worked well?
Yeah, Joe actually had 2 children as well. And he is so close to my daughter, and I am so close to his daughter. And I think a lot of that had to do with there was no pressure on either of them to develop a relationship with the new person. And we tried to both, I think, make it as, and I tried myself with his daughter. Like I didn't ever want to step in and act like I had some role in her life. And eventually she, just as my daughter did to you, she invited me in. She sent me a card talking about stepmom. I was blown away. Like it was the sweetest thing. And, it makes me cry now to even think about it, that she's so incredibly open to me being a part of her life in a mother type role. And
she loves having 2 dads.
They both do.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, they both do. They both really appreciate, I think because of the people we are, like the person Joe is, he's a very kind and hands-off kind of person. That made it a lot easier to just step in and start doing fun things with my daughter. Like we went and played mini golf, and we went to movies, and we did things like that. And she got to know him as a friend.
Yeah, and I think it was important because, I could sense some resistance, right, to the changing of relationships, right? This is my mom. You're taking me away from my dad, all that, those messages, right, that they think. And so it was really important to me to have a completely hands-off approach until that point where she decided that it was okay to have something different.
Yeah.
And it was great at that point. It took a while, but
I remember when it was, when she was 10, she had to have surgery. And the morning of the surgery, she realized the stakes were high. You're going to be put under and these things are going to happen. And she started to cry, and she said to me, "Tell Joey I love him."
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's so cool.
It made me cry.
She wanted him to know in case she didn't make it through the surgery.
And at that point, our relationship changed for the better. It just took a big, it was never bad, but it took this great leap forward.
And I really think it was because you never demanded anything. Neither one of us did.
Yeah, never like, I'm your father, I'm your stepfather, whatever. Let her do her thing. And she's a great kid, so it was easy to do that. But
right. I guess from each of y'all's perspective, but I'll kind of ask the question, Molly, from your perspective. Joe talks about how he didn't want to ever force the relationship with your daughter when getting into it. I think that I feel like some daughters might be like, he doesn't want to get to know me. He doesn't want to be a part of my life. I think some daughters might, interpret it like that if he's not maybe trying to get to know me. But I think that a lot of it probably had to do with the way that you communicated to her about him. And so I'm interested to hear why maybe she didn't take it like that.
Yeah, I think he was very available for a relationship, and we did a lot of things together. It was just that we never said to her, you have to treat him a certain way.
Right.
You know, we let that be up to her as to how close she wanted to be and when. And I really think that was key.
I do
is
too.
to let it be on her own terms.
Yeah, I think what I'm getting the insight of is it wasn't like he never saw her. It was he was around. It's more that you guys never placed expectations on her about what the relationship should be.
Yes, it was like we did a lot of things together, but it wasn't like you should hug him when we see each other. Don't say anything like that.
Yeah,
I'm sure that happens a decent amount.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. People trying to force the relationship to happen.
Yeah, like it's supposed to look a certain way.
Yeah.
So I'm a big habit oriented guy, and I'm interested to hear if you guys feel like you have most important relationship habits, whether it's daily things, weekly things, monthly things, yearly things. Is it like every single month we need to sit down and address one of these questions in one of your books? Is it every single month we need to go on a trip? Is it every day I need to make sure I say I love you before you go to bed? Like, what do you guys feel like, if any, are some like important relationship habits that you might implement?
I think when you were saying those, Nick, I was kind of getting this like uneasy feeling in my stomach. Like, we should do this. We have to do this. We have to, those are rules about relationship that we don't really buy into, right? Because as soon as you make it a rule, then it's not fun anymore.
Right. There's a reason to it. I do think it's important, and it's become clear to me over the years, of just having a way to have some time together that's not scripted. So whether that's a date night, but unlike a lot of relationship coaches, I don't like to tell couples you need to have a date night, because so many people respond to that as like, oh, one more thing I have to do. Like, it's more work. That feels like work to me. So better for us that, there's a weekend coming up and there's nothing planned for Saturday. So how about we leave that open and let's see what we feel like doing when that time comes, as opposed to something necessarily preordained, like you are going to do this. It just doesn't have the
right. It definitely shows up as a have to and not a want to.
But I think that having free time together to do something that you both want to do when that time comes, that I would say is a good habit.
And I think the other big habit that comes to mind for me is just being grateful for your partner.
Yeah, I know.
And you can do that every day easily.
Yeah.
And I think
and probably an important part of that is actually verbalizing it to the other person.
I don't even know that it's, I think that since we both have it, we both share that feeling. It's just in the space.
Oh, that's a good point.
I think however we verbalize it would come naturally.
Right.
Not because it's like, oh man, the day's almost gone and I haven't said I'm grateful for you today.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like, we demonstrate it to each other, I think, rather than
naturally.
speak it to each other.
Naturally. Speak it too, but it's not something that we tell ourselves we have to do every day. Like, definitely no have tos. Like, if we didn't kiss today or we didn't say I love you today, it's not going to be like, you didn't matter to me. Right. No.
No, I think that's really important. I think have tos and shoulds can sometimes be very dangerous, and it's creating something that doesn't need to. It's potentially creating conflict by saying those things have to happen.
It's really an intimacy smotherer. All those should.
But I feel like it's like you've touched on relationship coaches. I'm assuming I've never interacted with a relationship coach, but I know that so many people, like, we have to have one date night a week. We got to do at least one date night a month. And I feel like I hear that all the time.
Yeah. I am not an advocate. There's a line in our first book, The Soulmate Experience, where a man we were talking to said, and about this, because he and his wife were in couples coaching, couples therapy, and they were supposed to establish a date night, and he was not feeling good about it. He said, there's a big difference between wanting to have a date night and having to have a date night.
Yeah, that's powerful. It's a big difference, no doubt about that. Well, before I ask the last question, I just want to acknowledge both of you guys for having the difficult conversations early and often when it comes to relationships, because it seems like it has obviously served a massively positive role in the relationship that you have with yourselves and with each other. And for you guys to be able to grow so much individually and have your own identity, but grow as a couple as well, that's very admirable, because I feel like some people can lose their own identity when they have a couple, when they're part of a couple or a marriage for so long. And being able to do that and be such a good role model for that is inspiring for me and inspiring from a lot of people, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Of course. Well, you guys need to make sure, we talked a little bit about their couple of books during this podcast. You guys need to make sure you go get the Soulmate Experience, which was their first book, and then their most recent book called Wild Monogamy. And you need to make sure you go follow them on social media at Molly and Joe as well. That's MALI and Joe, Joe. You can follow them on Instagram. Where else can people go learn more about you guys and connect with you?
YouTube.
We have a lot of videos on YouTube.
And Facebook.
Awesome. YouTube and Facebook. You guys make sure, whether you are in a tough time in a relationship or you're not in a tough time, it's never a bad time. It's always the right time to go learn about how you can make your relationship all that it absolutely can be. And like they said, I think oftentimes people wait till times are bad to have difficult conversations, but sometimes you're already behind if you're waiting till then. But it's almost most important to have these conversations, these meta conversations in advance, so that when situations potentially arise, you have more tools in your tool belt and knowledge of the other person to be able to handle them nimbly. So make sure you go learn more about them and get their books and stuff like that. But last question is, I'm going to spin it a little bit differently than how I normally ask it. Usually I ask about how to get closer to the best version of yourself, but I want to spin it in a relationship perspective. And so basically, I think that any kind of growth journey is always a constant journey. I believe it's always ever developing. We're never perfect by ourselves. We're never perfect as a relationship. And I also believe that it's a unique journey. I think that everybody, the way that they continue to grow and develop is unique to them. So the way I'm going to ask this for you guys is, if there are 3 things that y'all could currently do or currently work on to continue to have the best relationship and nurture the best relationship that you could possibly have, then what are 3 things that y'all could currently do or currently work on?
You mean 3 things that we're not doing now?
Not necessarily. It could be things that you're doing now that you're just got to continue to do.
I think one of the things that comes to me, and it is something that we're continually working on, is aging itself brings challenges. And I just don't think most people are ready for that. I'm not ready for it. But
and I'm 5 years older than you are.
Yeah, I know. But it brings challenges, I think for women in particular. The culture does not support you being attractive as older when you're older. And Joe's just such a help with me around this and to continuing to change my belief system around it, because I've been programmed by my culture to believe women are not attractive when they're older. And so that is something I am big time working on. One of the ways I do that is, when I see an older woman now, I'm like looking at her going, oh, how is she attractive? Not whether, but how. And that's been huge for me. So that's one thing that we'll be working on for the rest of our lives.
Yeah. I think another thing to me that's super important to keep our relationship going is that we laugh a lot, right? We are always looking for opportunities to enjoy each other's company and to laugh. And so I think that's a big one, at least for me, to have a relationship that I always look forward to being in.
I've got another one. One of the things that we advocate doing and do ourselves is, when there are things we're nervous about, we continue to find ways to play in that nervousness. And one thing that makes Joe very nervous is dancing. And so,
yeah, didn't grow up a dancer.
And so we take the opportunities, and he's willing and he'll do it, as he's still working with this belief that he's not good at it, but he's willing. And we've got one other one coming up I haven't even told you about.
Oh, great. All right. Well, yeah,
there's a dance that's going to be happening at our daughter's wedding.
Oh, I don't know about it
that you're
yet.
going to be a part of. Yeah.
Oh,
I haven't even
fun.
broached it with you.
No, I've heard little things here and there about it.
That's amazing.
Saw something on a text about it. Yeah, I thought, oh.
That's amazing.
It doesn't mean me.
Oh, yeah, it does. I just haven't mentioned it yet. I was waiting for the right time.
I guess
Perfect.
this is Nick.
You can't get out of it now because everybody's listening. So
I guess not.
yeah. I did want to ask one more closing question because I wanted to ask it earlier, but I had forgot about it. So we've talked about the importance of having big conversations and difficult conversations. I know that me personally, I've had times where I know I've wanted to ask a bigger question or have a difficult conversation with my girlfriend, and sometimes it can be just hard to initiate the conversation. Once you get going, it's fine. But initiating it can sometimes be the tough part. What is your advice to somebody who is listening to this podcast and who's going to leave it like, okay, I know there's that thing I need to bring up with my significant other, or I know there's a question that I want to ask, but I've struggled to ask it. How can I best initiate that difficult conversation?
Exactly like you just did. You are upfront saying, there's something I've been wanting to talk to you about. I'm so nervous about it. I'm not sure what the right time is. It makes me just so uncomfortable to even be telling you this, but I really want to talk to you about it. So I don't know if that should be now or if there's another time where you'd be more open to like a conversation that's scary for me. Yeah.
Yeah, I think inviting your partner into your discomfort.
Yeah, it's good.
Right. Is a great way to move out of that place. Mm-hmm. Right. Because I think at least for us, we're here to help each other grow. And so if there's a place where Molly is uncomfortable, we want to talk about it. Yeah. We want to get to the bottom of that and make her more comfortable.
And I do, just like you just saw here with the dance thing. Like, I know it makes him nervous. I've been waiting for the right time. So I do that with big things too, and just say, it's going to be better to bring this up when we have, 2 hours we're going to be together and not a whole bunch of things we're doing at the moment, or you're not feeling stressed out from a long day. I'm going to wait for that time till that time feels right, because I'm going to have the best outcome then.
She has incredible patience in that respect.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Well, there were so many great things in here today, y'all. I think the thing that I just am continually going back to is how arguments and conflicts should not be an accepted regularity in relationships. But if there are those things that pop up, know that, okay, maybe these things can be mitigated and largely diminished in the future if conversations are had, if I get to learn more about my significant other, and also if I just get more tools and things in my tool belt. So absolutely great today. I know so many people got a lot of value in it. So make sure you guys follow them on Instagram, follow them on Facebook, on YouTube, and continue to get more relationship advice, guidance, and tools and tips from them. But that's all we got today, Molly and Joe. I really appreciate it.
All right. Thanks you so
for having
much.
us, Nick.
It's fabulous.
It's been fun.
Of course.